Be me. 47-year-old tenured professor of psychology and neuroscience at a research university. Spent 2 decades building a reputation on careful, methodical research, examining cognitive performance across demographics, published dozens of papers, sat on editorial boards, reviewed grants. Always believed that rigorous science would vindicate what I knew to be true about human capability. That when you control for socialization, educational access, cultural expectations, the playing field levels completely. That apparent differences are artifacts of methodology, sampling bias, or cultural conditioning. My entire academic framework rests on this foundation. 3 years ago, secured a massive grant to conduct the definitive study. Would finally put to rest all the sloppy research that kept suggesting performance gaps. Designed the most rigorous protocol imaginable. Recruited 10,000 participants, carefully stratified across age, socioeconomic status, education level, geography, equal numbers of men and women, obviously. I've spent months developing the testing battery with my research team. Spatial reasoning tasks, mental rotation exercises, 3-dimensional visualization, physical capability assessments too, upper body strength, grip force, reaction time under load. Built in every possible control I could imagine. Accounted for prior training, controlled for athletic background, adjusted for body mass index, double-blind administration wherever possible. Had participants complete detailed questionnaires about their upbringing, educational experiences, cultural background. The idea was to demonstrate that once you account for all the socialization factors, the gaps disappear, or reverse entirely in some cases. Figured I would show how stereotype threat affected performance, how cultural conditioning created artificial limitations. This would be my magnum opus, the study that would be cited for the next 50 years. Submitted the protocol for IRB. Approval. Got it on the first try because my methodology was airtight. Began data collection in year 1. Recruited participants from 12 different cities across the country. Hired and trained a team of research assistants. Brought on 3 postdocs. Rented testing facilities. Purchased equipment. Coordinated schedules. Watched the data roll in month after month. First year complete. Preliminary analyses looked fine. I mean, there were some patterns, but nothing we couldn't explain with secondary analyses. Clearly, the men who performed better had more prior exposure or came from backgrounds that encouraged spatial thinking. Year 2, sample size growing larger. Starting to notice the patterns aren't washing out the way I expected. The regression models weren't showing what they should. Kept adding covariates, controlling for more variables. Educational attainment, childhood activities, parental occupation, birth order, everything, the effects persisted. Actually got stronger, with larger sample sizes. I started feeling this creeping unease during lab meetings. My postdocs looking at each other with these uncertain expressions. One of them gently suggesting maybe we should consider alternative theoretical frameworks. Shut that down immediately. We hadn't controlled for implicit bias in the testing situation itself yet. Had to account for experimenter effects, environmental factors, time of day, room temperature. Added more measures, more controls. Year 3, approaching full enrollment. Lying awake at night thinking about the data, running analyses in my head, trying to figure out what we were missing. The spatial rotation tasks showing consistent male advantage even after controlling for everything. Effect size not huge but unmistakable, statistically robust. The physical measures even more pronounced. Upper body strength differences that persisted across every demographic category. Told myself it was about muscle recruitment patterns, biomechanical. Efficiency, we hadn't measured properly. But we had measured it properly. We'd measured everything properly. That was the whole point of the study. 6 months ago, completed data collection. Entire team working on cleaning data, running final analyses. Brought in a statistical consultant, someone with no stake in the results. Needed to make sure our models were specified correctly. Consultant reviewed everything, said the methodology was impeccable. Asked what my hypotheses were. Explained that we expected null findings or female advantages once controls were applied. Consultant looked at me with this neutral expression. Said the data showed significant male advantages in spatial tasks and all physical capability measures. Said the effects were consistent across subgroups, robust to different model specifications. Said this was some of the cleanest data they'd ever seen. I felt something twist in my stomach. Asked them to run the analyses again with different covariates. They did. Results unchanged. Asked them to try subset analyses, different age groups separately. They did. Pattern held across all ages. Asked them to check for data collection errors, outliers, anything. They looked at me with something like pity. Said the data was solid. Spent weeks going through every possible alternative explanation. Maybe the testing environment was subtly biased despite our controls. Maybe the tasks themselves were culturally loaded in ways we hadn't detected. Maybe there was something about the recruitment strategy. We kept hitting the same wall. The methodology was exactly what I'd wanted it to be. Rigorous, careful, comprehensive. And the results were exactly what I'd spent my career arguing against. Decided to write up the results anyway. Took 4 months to draft the manuscript. Every sentence felt like pulling teeth. Had to describe findings that contradicted my previous work. My theoretical framework. My published papers. My invited talks. My expert testimony. Everything I'd built my reputation on. Sent it to my closest colleague for feedback before submission. They called me instead of emailing comments. Said I needed to think carefully about how to frame this. Said the results were going to be controversial. Said people would misinterpret them, use them for ideological purposes. I knew all that. Asked what I was supposed to do. Falsify data? They said, of course not, but maybe emphasize the limitations more. Focus on the socio-cultural context. I'd already done that. The limitations section was 3 pages long. The discussion was full of context and nuance. But the results were the results. Submitted to a top-tier journal known for rigorous peer review. If the methodology was flawed, the reviewers would catch it. Waited 3 months for reviews. Came back with minor revisions. Reviewers praised the study design, the sample size, the careful controls. One reviewer said it was the most methodologically sound study on the topic they'd encountered. Requested some additional analyses, clarification of a few points, standard stuff. No one questioned the fundamental findings. Revised and resubmitted. Accepted 2 weeks later. Sat at my desk staring at the acceptance email. Should have felt triumph, vindication. This was the kind of publication that justified a career. Major journal, huge sample, definitive methodology. Instead felt hollow. Paper scheduled for publication in 6 weeks. University Public Relations Office got wind of it. Wanted to do a press release, showcase the large-scale research coming out of our department. Tried to downplay it. Told them it was just another academic paper. Not really newsworthy. They disagreed. Said a 10,000 participant study was exactly the kind of research universities want to highlight. Said it demonstrated our capacity for large-scale science. Said they wanted to organize a press conference. Felt panic rising. Explained that the findings were sensitive, could be misinterpreted. They said that's why we should present them in a controlled setting, with proper context. Said I could explain the nuances, the limitations, the importance of not overgeneralizing. Found myself backed into a corner. Couldn't explain why I didn't want to present my own findings without revealing my ideological discomfort, and that would undermine my credibility as a scientist. Had spent my entire career insisting that I followed the data wherever it led, that I wasn't driven by ideology, that I trusted rigorous methodology. Now the methodology had led somewhere I didn't want to go, and I had to follow it anyway. Agreed to the press conference. Scheduled for 2 weeks before publication, standard embargo arrangement, university auditorium, invited campus and local media. Spent those 2 weeks preparing my presentation. Every slide a small death graph showing male advantage in mental rotation tasks across all demographic subgroups. Chart displaying upper body strength. Differences that persisted regardless of training background. Table of regression coefficients. All pointing the same direction. Wrote and rewrote my talking points. Needed to emphasize that statistical differences don't determine individual capabilities, that overlap between groups is substantial. That socialization and culture still matter even if they don't explain everything. That this doesn't justify discrimination or unequal treatment. all true, all important, but also felt like damage control, like I was already defensive about my own findings. The night before the press conference, couldn't sleep. Kept thinking about the papers I'd published arguing that cognitive differences were primarily socio-cultural, the expert witness testimony I'd given in discrimination cases, the keynote addresses where I'd confidently asserted that biology was minimal compared to environment. Hadn't been lying, had believed it based on the evidence available. But now there was better evidence. My evidence, and it pointed elsewhere. Morning of the press conference, put on my most professional outfit, needed to project authority, competence. Arrived at the auditorium an hour early to set up. Technician helping me load the presentation. Saw my hands shaking slightly as I clicked through slides. Audience started filing in. Recognized science reporters from major outlets. University communications had promoted this more than I'd realized. Saw colleagues from my department, people from other universities, administrators who'd approved my grant funding, students from my graduate seminar. Felt exposed in a way I'd never experienced before. This wasn't an academic conference where I could present to a friendly audience. This was public, on the record, being filmed. Saw him walk in 10 minutes before start time. Professor Chen from the biology department. We'd clashed at faculty meetings for years. He'd always argued for stronger consideration of biological factors in behavior. I'd always pushed back, insisted on primacy of social and environmental influences, had dressed him down more than once in meetings for what I called reductive biologism. He took a seat in the third row, center, made eye contact with me and nodded politely, and felt my throat tighten. He knew what this study showed. I had probably read the preprint that went up yesterday. Was sitting there waiting to watch me present findings that vindicated his position. University president introduced me, praised my distinguished career, my grant funding record, my publication history, talked about my commitment to rigorous science and careful methodology. Every word of praise felt like weight on my shoulders. Took the podium, and began with background on gender and cognition research. Decades of debate, methodological limitations in previous studies, need for large-scale, carefully controlled investigation, described my study design. Sample size, diversity of participants, rigorous controls. Could hear the pride in my own voice despite everything. It was a beautifully designed study. That was the problem. Advanced to the results slides, showed the spatial cognition findings first. Significant male advantages in mental rotation, three-dimensional visualization, spatial navigation tasks, effect sizes moderate but consistent, present across age groups, education levels, geographic regions, heard some murmuring in the audience, continued to physical capability results, upper body strength, grip force, reaction time under load, differences more pronounced here, even after controlling for body mass, training history, athletic participation, laid out the statistical evidence, confidence intervals, p-values, effect sizes, everything meticulously calculated and reported. Moved into the discussion section. This was where I could provide context, nuance, as began explaining that group differences don't determine individual capabilities, that substantial overlap exists between male and female distributions, that these findings don't justify discrimination, that socialization and culture remain important factors even if they don't explain all variance, that biological tendencies can be modified through training and practice. All true, all important qualifications. But even as I said them, could feel how defensive they sounded. Like I was making excuses for my own data. Opened the floor for questions. First few were softballs from friendly colleagues, asking about specific methodological details, future research directions. Then saw Chen's hand go up. Had known this was coming. Called on him, kept my voice steady. He stood, voice calm and measured, said he wanted to commend me for conducting such rigorous research. Said it took intellectual courage to publish findings that contradicted one's theoretical priors. Every word landed like a small knife. Then asked his question. Given these findings, did I plan to revise my previous theoretical framework, the one that minimized biological factors in favor of sociocultural explanations? The question I'd been dreading, Could feel every eye in the room on me. The cameras recording, reporters taking notes. My graduate students watching their advisor navigate this moment. Thought about dissembling, deflecting, talking about how science is iterative, how we update based on new evidence. All true, but would sound evasive. Thought about getting defensive, attacking the framing of his question. Would look petty and undermine my credibility. Took a breath. Heard myself saying that yes, these findings suggest my previous theoretical framework overweighted sociocultural factors. That while environment and socialization remain important, this data indicates biological factors play a larger role than I previously acknowledged. That I would need to integrate these findings into my theoretical model going forward. The words tasted like ashes, but they were true. I couldn't deny the data, especially not my own data, collected. With methodology I designed specifically to eliminate confounds. Saw something flicker across Chen's face. Not triumph exactly, more like satisfaction. He nodded, said he appreciated my intellectual honesty. Sat back down. Felt like I'd just conceded something fundamental. Not just a theoretical point, but my entire professional identity. The feminist scholar who'd built a career arguing against biological determinism, now publicly acknowledging that biology mattered more than I'd wanted to admit. Few more questions from reporters. How should the public interpret these findings? What are the implications for education, workplace policies? Did my best to provide measured, responsible answers. Emphasized individual variation, importance of equal opportunity regardless of group averages, cautioned against using population statistics to make individual judgments, all the right things to say. But could hear how I was being forced to defend implications I'd once have denied existed. Press. Conference wound down after 45 minutes. Thanked everyone for attending. Stood at the podium gathering my materials as the room emptied, hands still shaking slightly. Saw Chen making his way toward me. Considered fleeing, but that would be cowardly. He approached with that same measured expression. Said he knew that couldn't have been easy. Said he respected that I'd let the data speak rather than trying to bury findings. I found ideologically uncomfortable. Wanted to scream at him. Wanted to say he had no idea what this cost me. My theoretical framework, my reputation, my sense of myself as a scholar, everything I'd built was predicated on the idea that gender differences in cognition and capability were primarily artificial. Products of culture and socialization that could be overcome with the right interventions, and I'd just proved myself wrong, with the most rigorous methodology possible, in front of cameras and reporters and colleagues. Couldn't even claim the study was flawed. I designed it specifically to be unassailable. Instead, just nodded. Said, science requires following evidence wherever it leads. The words came out automatic, a platitude I'd repeated countless times. But now they meant something different. Now they meant accepting that I'd been wrong. That my ideological commitments had led me to incorrect conclusions. That the careful, rigorous science I'd always championed had betrayed my worldview. Chen left. Other colleagues offered congratulations on the study. Each word of praise felt like mockery. Yes, wonderful study, beautiful methodology. Just proved that everything I'd argued for 20 years was incomplete at best. Walked back to my office in a daze, sat at my desk surrounded by shelves of books and journals, my own publications among them. Papers arguing that gender differences in spatial cognition were artifacts of testing conditions, that physical capability gaps could be explained entirely by training and cultural encouragement, that biology was a minor factor compared to social construction, all of it now revealed as wishful thinking. Not lies exactly. I'd believed it based on the evidence I had. But I'd also wanted to believe it. Had built my identity around believing it. The feminist scholar who proved that gender was primarily performed, that differences were made, not born. And now my own work had demonstrated the limits of that framework. Checked my email, already flooding with messages, reporters requesting interviews, colleagues from other universities wanting to discuss the findings, former graduate students checking in, advocacy organizations asking me to contextualize the results, and some others, angrier ones, people I'd worked with on various initiatives over the years, asking how I could publish such findings, What I was thinking, giving ammunition to sexists and reactionaries. Didn't I understand how this would be used? Stared at those emails for a long time, wanted to write back. That I hadn't had a choice. That the data was what it was. That we couldn't just ignore findings because they were ideologically inconvenient, but that would sound defensive. And part of me wondered if they were right. Should I have buried the study, found some methodological excuse to invalidate it, refused to publish results I knew would be misused, but that would make me a fraud. Would mean I never really believed in the scientific method I'd always championed. Would mean my commitment to evidence was conditional on it supporting my priors. I couldn't live with that. However much I hated these findings, they were real. 10,000 participants, 3 years of rigorous data collection, peer-reviewed methodology, couldn't wish them away. Spent the rest of the day in my office, didn't teach my afternoon seminar, canceled office hours, just sat there as the reality settled over me. My life's work hadn't been invalidated exactly. Socialization and culture still matter. Discrimination and bias are still real. But the foundation had shifted. Biology wasn't the minimal factor I'd believed it to be. Wasn't just noise in the system that proper controls would eliminate. Was signal, real and persistent. And I'd proven it, with my own carefully designed research, in the most publicly visible way possible. Thought about my graduate students, young scholars I'd trained in my theoretical framework, had I set them up for the same reckoning I was experiencing. Taught them to minimize biological factors, to look for sociocultural explanations first and always, and now they'd have to watch their advisor publicly revise that position. Thought about the expert testimony I'd given, the discrimination cases where I'd confidently asserted that performance differences were due to bias and unequal treatment. Not wrong exactly, bias is real, but incomplete. Had I oversimplified because I wanted certain conclusions to be true? Sat there until the building grew quiet. Evening settling over. Campus. Should go home but couldn't seem to move. Kept thinking about Chen's face, that expression of satisfaction. Not cruel, not gloating. Just the quiet vindication of someone whose position had been proven correct. He'd been arguing for years that we needed to take biological factors more seriously. That pretending they didn't exist didn't help anyone. I'd dismissed him as reductive, accused him of justifying inequality, and now my own research had proven his point. The feminist professor who'd built a career on one set of assumptions, forced by her own rigorous methodology to accept their opposite, couldn't even claim the study was biased or flawed, had designed it specifically to eliminate every possible confound, had insisted on the largest sample size, the most careful controls, because I'd been so certain that proper methodology would prove me right. And it had done exactly what I designed it to do. Produced clean, reliable, replicable data that contradicted everything I'd looked at, wanted to believe. Finally left my office around 9, walked through empty campus to my car, drove home on autopilot, kept replaying the press conference in my mind, standing at that podium acknowledging my theoretical framework needed revision, admitting in front of cameras and colleagues that I'd overweighted sociocultural factors, conceding the point to Chen. To everyone who'd ever argued that biology mattered more than I wanted to admit, got home, poured a drink I didn't really want, sat in my kitchen thinking about tomorrow. Would have to face my graduate students, my colleagues. Would have to give interviews explaining and contextualizing. Would have to watch my findings get cited in ways I'd hate, but couldn't deny them. Couldn't escape them. They were mine. My study, my methodology, my data, irrefutable, because I'd made them irrefutable. The perfect trap. Outsmarted by my own commitment to rigorous science, by my own insistence that proper methodology would reveal the truth. It had, just not the truth I wanted. Sat there in my kitchen, 47-year-old tenured professor, distinguished publication record, respected scholar, feminist academic who'd built everything on a foundation that had just cracked, and there was no way out. No escape from data I couldn't deny, from findings I'd have to defend, from the reality that I'd been wrong and had proved it to the world with the most rigorous study I could design, Chen had asked if I'd revise my theoretical framework. The answer was yes. Had to. The data demanded it. My own standards demanded it. And that was the real humiliation. Not that I'd been proven wrong, but that I'd proven myself wrong. With methodology so careful and rigorous that even I couldn't escape it.